The Mandalorian Season 2 just premiered and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Do you know where your children are? Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my slightly bleary-eyed review of the Season 2 premiere of The Mandalorian, the show that is literally keeping Star Wars fans awake at night, but for good reasons, because I stayed up along with, I'm sure, many other people who are doing their own videos or maybe just puzzling over this episode in their heads right now. But I wanted to give you my fresh takes, my fresh thoughts, my first thoughts about the premiere of The Mandalorian Season 2, which was entitled The Marshal. Right off the bat, I just want to let you know that I will start with my non-spoiler thoughts because I know that not everybody is up in the middle of the night watching this show. And then I will transition to my spoiler thoughts. So if you want to hear what I thought about this episode without any spoilers, stay tuned. I will tell you right now, and then we're going to go into some of those juicy details because there was lots of really interesting stuff that was dropped in this episode. So before we go into those details, in a general sense, I have to say that Season 2 for me, for The Mandalorian, started much the way that Season 1 started and ended, which was that I really like this show. I like the corner that it occupies in the Star Wars universe, and once again, we get an episode that is an adventure, that has heavy shades of a Western theme. We haven't really, it seems like, tied too much into what the overarching story for this season is going to be, but I found this episode to be really, really entertaining, and it continues to do what I've enjoyed so far about this show, which is that it takes the iconography, it takes the things and the people and the places and the objects that we know in the Star Wars universe, but instead of just dropping them in for little cameos, it shows us a new side. It gives us a new dimension. We learn more about the worlds in which they inhabit. I'm trying to talk around so much right now because I don't want to spoil anything in this episode because there are a lot of fun little surprises, but it continues to feel like a show that lives in the Star Wars universe and doesn't just want to show you the Star Wars universe, because that's something the show could do very easily. Trot out these Star Wars things for you to see just for the cheap applause value. No, this feels like a show that is set in a functioning universe. It is trying to tell its own story, to be its own thing, and I thought that this episode did that really, really well. The action was great. The adventure was great. The scale, again, this continues to be delivering Star Wars on a feature film level scale as far as effects go, as far as production value and everything else. It does not look like a TV show. It looks like any of the other Star Wars films. And all credit for this episode goes to Jon Favreau, who wrote and directed it. You can tell that he is a Star Wars fan who wants to give Star Wars fans something really fun, but at the same time wants the show to live on its own two legs, which it does. So without going into the spoilers, which I'm going to do here in a second, I will say my general review of the Season 2 premiere of The Mandalorian was that it continues the winning streak that I found with the first season. It was another great adventure set in the Star Wars universe. It does set the table for a couple things that are going to happen down the line. We do see our friend the child in this episode, although he doesn't play a very crucial part in this episode. I'm sure we're going to get way more into this guy's story as we keep going throughout the season. But I really enjoyed it pretty much as I enjoyed any episode in the first season of The Mandalorian, and that's quite a bit. So that is my overall thoughts. So if you just wanted to know what I thought about this episode without going into specifics, tune out now because we're going to put the big warning on the screen right now. From here on out, we're going to go into spoilers because there's a lot of really cool stuff that I want to talk about. So last warning, if you don't want to be spoiled about anything in The Mandalorian Season 2 premiere episode, The Marshal, tune out now because from here on out, we are going to be getting to some juicy details. Okay, now that we can go into some detail, I want to really get into some of the things that I thought were really cool about this episode. Of course, we open at this boxing sumo type thing. We have two Gamorreans facing off against each other. And, this is probably the closest that you got to fan service in the sense that, did they need to be Gamorreans? No, they really didn't need to, but you recognize who they are. And I didn't think that it was so cutesy that it was too over the top. It was really about this meeting between the Mandalorian and this underworld guy who was voiced by John Leguizamo, and I could not place that voice when I was watching the show. I'm like, I know that voice. I know who it is. It was John Leguizamo playing this mobster at the beginning. I love that interaction, this fight between the Mandalorian and his goons, these creatures that thrive in the dark. I thought it was a really great cold open to the episode. There was also a little reference, and I wonder if Jon Favreau even meant this when he was writing it, but when the Mandalorian looks at the child / Baby Yoda and says, "Wherever I go, he goes," that's my buddy. That's the My Buddy toy from when I was a kid.
My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, my buddy. Wherever I go, he goes.
So I wonder if that was a conscious reference from Jon Favreau or just an accidental thing. But where it eventually takes us is to Tatooine. And that's where in my head I'm like, okay, because we've already gone to Tatooine once. We went to Tatooine last season. What does another trip to Tatooine really have to offer us? But I was happy with what it ended up giving us. Mando heads to this town that we've not been to before, which is called Mos Pelgo. And I loved his entrance here because, like I said, this is very heavy into the Western tradition, the idea of the lone cowboy riding his horse through this deserted, dusty desert town that's been ravaged, and he's gonna have to go and save it. We are squarely in the Gary Cooper Westerns era, but it doesn't feel out of place in Star Wars. And then we get to meet the person who this episode is named after, which is the Marshal, who's played by Timothy Olyphant, who apparently was still doing Justified a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The Marshal's name is Cobb Vanth, but obviously I'm sure the thing that people are already talking about isn't who the Marshal is, but what he's wearing, which would be Boba Fett's Mandalorian armor. As a matter of fact, that's why Mando is there. He heard that there was another Mandalorian in the city. As it turns out, it's not a Mandalorian, it is Cobb Vanth, and now Mando wants that armor back, because if there's one thing we know about Mandalorians, it's that nobody else gets the cool armor except for them. They are very exclusive that way. They're like the mean girls of the Star Wars universe. Only they can wear the armor. Nobody else gets it. So we have this classic Western thing, which is that Mando wants the armor back, and Cobb Vanth will give him the armor back if he will help save the town from this creature that has been menacing it called a Kraken Dragon, which is pretty much the monster from Tremors, except it can't hear you walk. I liked the design on this thing, and the visual effects on it were great. Again, this is not a television show. You can tell that Disney is pouring so much money into this show, which probably makes sense because they're not making any Star Wars movies, at least not actively right now. So it makes sense to invest heavily into this show, especially because this is really the best thing that Star Wars has had going for it in quite a while. There was one really interesting thing, though, about the Kraken Dragon, and again, I think it shows that if it's not Jon Favreau, it's somebody else, or maybe it's just an accident and somebody just pulled a sound effect out of the Lucasfilm archives, but the sound that they give the Kraken Dragon to make when it's attacking is the same sound that Obi-Wan Kenobi used to scare the Tuscan Raiders away, but not in the current iteration of Star Wars. In the new version of Star Wars that's on Disney Plus, they redid that sound, and it's like he's yelling like somebody stepped on his toes or something. I'm talking about the sound that was like from one of the special editions a couple back with this kind of like a siren-y sound. They use that as the sound of the Kraken Dragon. And I love this because this is one of those tiny little things that helps bond the Star Wars universe together, which is that version of Obi-Wan Kenobi, before George Lucas decided to redub it with a different sound, it makes total sense now that he would have used that sound to scare away the Tuscan Raiders, because it's the sound of this predatory creature that they would have a mortal primal fear of. So somebody was really doing their research and knew what sound effects to pull, because I really appreciated that little touch, and they didn't draw a lot of attention to it. But having seen that version of Star Wars so many times, that sound immediately was something that I recognized. So we have this uneasy alliance, this big fight between the Tuscan Raiders, the citizens of Mos Pelgo, and then the Marshal and the Mandalorian. And I like the execution of this fight. This was the Mandalorian's mission for this episode, and then he rode off on his speeder bike into the two sunsets to whatever comes next. But of course, the reveal that I'm sure everybody is talking about right now is the reveal of what certainly appears to be Boba Fett watching his old armor riding away on a speeder bike. If it's not Boba Fett and it's another clone, then this is an awfully big coincidence that he's just hanging out on Tatooine, spying on a Mandalorian. We knew that Temuera Morrison was going to be coming back in some capacity, that Boba Fett was going to be coming back supposedly in some capacity. I'm sure there will be a lot of is he or isn't he about, is this actually Boba Fett? Is this another clone coming in to track down and see what happened to Boba Fett? We will find that out. But this is a little place setting, a little table setting where we don't know yet. We don't know how that's going to pay off in future episodes. And I've been very skeptical about this idea of bringing in Boba Fett and bringing in Ahsoka Tano and how are they going to use those characters. I dug the way that they introduced the concept of Boba Fett in this episode. Where they're going to go from here, I don't know, because I really don't know why Mando would stick around on Tatooine. Maybe Boba Fett is going to track him now that he's got his armor. Who knows? But it does set up some interesting things for the future of the season. I'm really interested to see what the next episode has in store. I'm sure that there are some folks maybe that had hoped to see the larger overarching storyline introduced in this. We didn't see Carl Weathers. We didn't see Gina Carano. We didn't see Giancarlo Esposito in this episode. But I thought it was a really great reintroduction to why The Mandalorian is such a great show, in my opinion, which is at its core and at its heart, it's just a really good space adventure show. And I really, really liked this episode. We will see what happens with this storyline as we go on, but I think this was a great start to season 2, and I will be sitting on the edge of my seat to stay up until the middle of the night next week when they premiere these episodes. I don't know why they do that. I feel like if they premiered them later, people would all be watching them together, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, high marks for me on this episode. I really enjoyed it. But what did you think? Are you excited by the beginning of season 2 of The Mandalorian? Are you looking forward to the next several weeks as we see what happens to these characters? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you want to see even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. I actually just posted a video to my patrons yesterday, I guess, at this point, about building this set and how we did it. Kind of a behind the scenes thing. That's the kind of stuff that I love to share with everybody over on Patreon, so be sure to check that out. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast. I actually just did Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, with Ken Knapsack earlier this week. I would love for you to check that out. You can see it on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, wherever you subscribe to audio podcasts, or you can catch the YouTube version over on the Schmodown Entertainment Network. Thank you so much for watching this recap and review of Season 2, Episode 1 of The Mandalorian. We'll see you next time.